Well, hello and welcome to another one of our interview series. I'm so pleased to have with us today Francesca King, who is a collaborative divorce lawyer in Milano, Italy. Welcome, Francesca.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So Francesca is a collaborative lawyer who specializes in helping families through conflict situations. She's amongst some of the first collaboratively trained lawyers in Italy, and she's committed to supporting the growth of collaborative practice worldwide. So we're very pleased to have her with us today to talk to you more about the collaborative divorce process, what it is, how it differs from some of the other divorce negotiation options that you have, and why you may want to look into this as a process. So let's get started. Francesca, let's start by having you describe what the collaborative divorce process is.
So collaborative divorce is essentially a voluntary dispute resolution process in which parties settle without resort to litigation. What happens specifically is that the parties sign initially an agreement that we call participation agreement, which describes the nature and the scope of what the collaborative practice process is going to deal with. In particular, parties commit to disclose all the information that is relevant to the matter, and to do that voluntarily, and they commit to negotiate with good faith and to look for solutions that are mutually acceptable, so acceptable for both parties. So the focus is really to find an agreement that meets the needs of the family, so the two parties, the couple, but also the children when children are involved, and the family as a whole. And I think this focus is an essential part of the collaborative process. Another interesting and peculiar thing is that parties will be assisted by a team of professionals that are trained to support the parties keep that focus on the family interests and needs, and help the couple to negotiate and to communicate in a respectful way, helping them to listen to one another and to help them feel listened at the same time, and so help them to find creative solutions for their future. I like to say that it is a sort of constructive way to deal with the divorce without looking only at the past and what went wrong, but really helping families look at the future and help them transition to this new life that they will have in front of them. Mm-hmm. And so it's a future focused process, I would say, at the same time.
Yeah, you and I both have that experience helping families within that collaborative divorce process. And the focus really is on that transparency, as you talk about, and building a better future, and building resilience for your family in two homes and for your children. So thank you very much for that description. I'd like to touch on a little piece of what you brought in, mm-hmm. where you talked about the various professionals that would be involved. There's the lawyers, and then there's the rest of the team as well. And in different areas, of course, our viewers are going to be all around the world. And so in various areas around the world, collaborative divorce has, of course, developed in different ways, depending on the jurisdiction. And so, but there's some base team, the members of the team. And so what I thought would be helpful is if we could just go through what that might look like as far as that team model. And of course, knowing that all of these team members are typically optional. And what the most important thing that can happen is for the separating couple to decide and remain as the decision makers as to who the members of that team will be. And again, it will look different in different jurisdictions. In my jurisdiction, we typically will start with the lawyers and the parties, so in a four-way meeting setting, but then build the team from there. So can you talk a little bit more, Francesca, about the team model and who might be involved in that model?
Yes. So the idea behind the involvement of a team of professionals is that divorce does not only deal with legal aspects, there are emotional aspects, financial aspects. So the goal is to bring in all the competences that are needed to that family to actually settle their divorce and deal with it in a constructive way. Two lawyers are sort of the minimum team, a lawyer for each party, and this is everywhere. All the world has this as the sort of the basic team, and this is provided by the ethical standards of collaborative practice. But then what happens is that you can bring in the professionals that are needed. Typically, there are mental health professionals that are involved. There can be involved as neutrals. In my jurisdiction, we usually have a neutral mental health professional that we call facilitator. I know that in other areas it is called family professional. I like that very much. In other
or even
areas,
a coach.
There are coaches. Yeah. So, which really helps the parties and sometimes the lawyers navigate the sort of the emotional dynamics that these conversations might bring. Collaborative practice is usually organized as a set of meetings where the parties are always there present, and so the emotions that are in the room can be strong, and having that kind of professional at the table can be really very useful in making these meetings efficient, productive, and sort of keep them going, and sort of help the parties not to get lost in these emotional aspects. And then you can bring a neutral, usually, I think in all jurisdiction it is a neutral expert, a financial expert, when it is needed at the table to look at the financial aspects of divorce and really help. Usually what I like about financial experts is that they gather all the information and then they take like a picture of the situation and help the parties look at it and help them educate them on what the solution can be, what are the resources available, what are the options available. And that is a very key role, I think, in many collaborative cases. You can also bring a child specialist sometimes when you need to bring the voice of the children at the table. Sometimes parents might see their children in different ways or have different concerns. And instead of arguing on who's right and who's wrong, the idea is to bring somebody that has the trust of both parents that can help them look at the needs of the children. And I think this is another key role that's essential. Something that's interesting about this is that the professionals are all trained specifically in collaborative practice, which means that they add to their own, competence, new skills. I can see this particularly in lawyers. We don't have, at least in Italy, but I hear that is also common in other jurisdictions. We don't have a specific training in listening skills or communication skills. We're not really trained to deal with conflict, even if conflict is what we handle day by day. And so this specific training helps us help families and support them dealing with their conflict. And at the same time, all the other professionals are trained together with the lawyers in working as a team. So we're not, different pieces, each doing their little bit and like sum together, but we become a team of professionals and we work together and taking together the responsibility of the work. And I think that is also a very useful component for the families.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to point out as well, furthering the idea of the team really working together, but also independently. And so every team member has a particular role. And so it may be that a particular section, like the financial planning for the future, as far as options for retirement or, settlement of the finances can be sectioned off, and the financial professional can work directly with the parties and then report back to the team, or we can have a wrap-up meeting, a summary meeting with the team, the whole team together to talk about that. The coaches may or may not be involved at certain parts of the group meetings as well. And another piece that I thought was interesting that you pointed out was that the training that all the members of the team have. And so collaborative divorce really has a different spin on how advocacy is carried out. And we had an interview with Victoria Smith, if our viewers want to check that out, with respect to the difference between litigation advocacy versus conflict resolution advocacy or collaborative divorce advocacy. And they are different in a way. And what's really important within the collaborative process, as you pointed out, Francesca, is that everyone has that same base training. And so everyone is trained and knows that when we are within that collaborative process, we are committed to that transparency. And that's a different style of negotiations than it is when you've, kind of hold your cards a little bit closer to your body.
And another thing that I think the collaborative professionals have and learn during that training is a different way to really deal with the negotiation, not only really learning how to, especially for lawyers that are trained traditionally to be, on a adversarial, but what they learn in the collaborative training is to sort of welcome the other party's perspective and help support the party, their client, in doing that, even when they don't agree with that perspective, but it's the possibility to consider it, to listen to it, that I think is common also in other consensual dispute resolution methods like mediation, but it is also key to collaborative practice.
Mm-hmm. Let's do a little comparison here to start to understand a little bit of the differences, because of course there's many different negotiation processes that families can use as they transition from one home into two. And collaborative divorce, we're talking about the elements of collaborative divorce, but let's do some comparisons. First, let's compare it with divorce court and what that means. And then next we'll go into what the difference between collaborative divorce versus mediation.
So when you divorce in court, I think that's typical of all jurisdiction. There can be, specific differences from country to country or region to region. But what happens is that you are delegating the decision to a third party that usually does not know you, unless, apart from reading what your lawyer has written and put up to him or to her. And so the judge decides based on his experience and what normally works for families, but might miss out on what are the specifics of your family. And moreover, it's not you that are making very personal decisions, like how often you see your children, how often your co-parent sees your children, what is the amount of money that you need to go on living the way you were living before, and all that kind of very intimate decisions. And so I usually tell my clients that this is a process that can be very useful when it is impossible to make a decision together, or when there are imbalances between the parties that are so big that it's really impossible to sort of re-put the couple in an equal and balanced position to actually take their decisions together. And so it's very useful that we have court for all those cases, but that doesn't have to be the recipe. I think we grew up thinking that divorce had to be something where you were actually battling one against the other, and it doesn't have to be like that. It can be a process where maybe difficult and challenging, where people make their decisions together, and professionals are there to support them doing that.
Yeah, and you made a good point, and that's what is so important to us at Up a Notch Learning. The key to everything that we do is to provide constructive and positive resources to help you as families who are going through separation and divorce, but also to make sure that you're very aware that there are options and to know what those options are so that you can make the best informed decision for yourself. And there may be some viewers who are embattled in litigation right now in divorce court, and there are options to change that. And or you might be just thinking about divorcing and you didn't even know that there was options. So this is what the goal is of today's talk, is to make sure that you know what those options are and what some of the key differences might be. So let's move on to mediation.
So mediation there are many different models of mediation all around the world, but sort of typically mediation is a process that involves a neutral professional that helps the couple to have the conversations that are needed to actually reach an agreement. Very commonly, lawyers are not involved in the process, or if they are involved, they are sort of what we say out of the room, and are maybe involved at the beginning of the process or at the end. But typically, at least in my jurisdictions, lawyers would not be involved during the process. So I look at mediation as a process that works very well for parties that need some professional support, need some help to have the conversation and the negotiation that is needed to actually find creative solutions for their issues, but at the same time that are able to sit together and without dedicated professionals there for them, without needing the support of somebody that's in their corner. And so for all those couples, mediation is a very good option, and it can really help them have constructive conversation in a respectful and meaningful way, and help them find the solutions. And so I usually define the difference, or one of the differences between collaborative and mediation in the kind of professional support you may need. So collaborative is really useful when you want to reach an agreement, with good faith and transparency, but you do feel the need of somebody that's there for you, a professional that's in your corner as
your advocate,
as you can say, and it's there for you. And in those cases, collaborative practice is a very good option, and it can provide the kind of support that couple, that family might need.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there's lawyer assisted mediation, and then there's lawyer unassisted mediation. And so it can get very expensive, of course, when you not only have the two of you in the room, you have your two lawyers and you have a mediator. So now there's three professionals in the room all at the same time. And so as you said, it really can be summed up in the difference in the structure of the people who are at the table. So there's either what's most typically in mediation is a three-way conversation. So mom, dad, and the mediator. And then in the collaborative divorce process, at the very base, I mean, of course, there's more team members that can be added, but at its core, there's mom, dad, and each of the lawyers. So three-way conversation versus four-way.
One of the specifics we haven't mentioned is that in the collaborative process, lawyers sign a disqualification agreement. So they commit to assist the parties at their best during the collaborative process, but also to non-assist them in a future litigation process that could happen between parties. And I think this kind of commitment from the lawyers is also very important to describe the collaborative process, because parties can trust that the other party's lawyer is somebody they will not find in court against them. And so this really helps to create a safe space where you can have difficult conversations or difficult negotiations, but with the trust that all the professionals involved are there to support that conversation. And I think that's another key element that you haven't mentioned.
And the communication clause I describe very similar to you, but I would even add to talk about the level of transparency that you can feel comfortable with. And so you described it as a safe place. And on top of that, it's that level of transparency where you can feel comfortable answering the questions of anyone in the room. And you know that these questions are being asked for the purpose of helping to find resolution, as opposed to in a more of a court or litigation approach. We'd normally call it cross-examination, right? Or when you're asking questions of the other side, it's more of a cross-examination feel. Yeah. Well, I'd love to have our viewers hear a little bit more about you, Francesca. And, you've been involved in the collaborative divorce movement for many years, but what drew you to collaborative divorce and the passion that you have for helping families in this way?
Well, I met sort of collaborative practice 10, maybe 11 years ago. And I was in a period of my life where I was really trying to understand how to help families in a constructive way. I didn't really feel that as a litigation lawyer, I was really helping the clients I was serving. It was like sometimes I had the impression that we might win, or I might be able to obtain what the client had asked me, but I still had the impression that I wasn't really helping them feeling better or finding a way to live their future in a way that made sense to me and probably to them. And so I was in that process of looking of how can I do this in a different way. And I had been trained in mediation and I liked that. But at the same time, I liked being a lawyer and being that advocate, that ally that I was mentioning before. So when I heard about collaborative, I really thought, wow, this is what I want to do. And so that was what drew me to collaborative. And I think I discovered that it is a better way, for me at least, to help families, because it really helped me focus on what is important for the client I'm talking with, how I can help him, and focus on his or her needs and the needs of the family and the children involved. And I sort of started building skills that were then very useful for me in whatever process I was working, because of course, the more you can understand what the needs of the other party is, the better you can help your client find an agreement. And so I think what really makes me think collaborative is a very useful process for families, because it helps them focus on what is important for them and for their children, and focus on the future. So it's like, I like to think as collaborative practice as when you're driving a car and you need to look in front of you, because otherwise you can get in a terrible accident. You have the mirror there, so you look at that mirror to check what's going on behind you, but the focus is not the mirror. The focus is the road in front of you. And so I like to think of collaborative that way. So the past is there, it's what you build on, but you're not focused on what went wrong and what went right in the past. You're just focused on helping the family transition to the future. And this is something you can then bring in whatever way you help families. But I learned it with collaborative.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of on the legal side. So as a lawyer, doing family law, of course, especially in the litigation sense, can be so very draining on lawyers. When I talk to clients, I describe, you've got one divorce happening and I've got 100 divorces happening all at once. And so we're constantly bombarded with, as you talked about earlier, is the emotional side of divorce. And people can, very good people who are in a very difficult place in their life. And so the emotions can often get very, very heated. And it can be very difficult as a professional to sustain that. And there's a lot of lawyers who are looking for a different way, a constructive way to help families. And, family law has traditionally brought, the advocacy component, the divorce court, and the when we think about, families having that correlation of I'm divorcing and therefore I need a lawyer and therefore I need to go to court, that automatic correlation, for a lot of lawyers as well, divorce court is something maybe they enjoy, or they feel their skill set is really made for that environment. But there's a lot of lawyers who really appreciate being able to stay out of that venue. And for those of us lawyers, you and myself included, of course, that's how we feel that we can best bring our skills to the table for families. And so there are some families that this collaborative divorce can really work for. And but the interesting part too is, Francesca, of course, with collaborative divorce, you need other lawyers to play in the sandbox with. And so you had brought collaborative divorce, really one of the first players to bring collaborative divorce to Italy and created an association. And can you tell us a little bit about that, the building up of the collaborative movement in Italy?
Yes, well, we organized our first training in 2010, and it was a training only for lawyers, and sort of 50 lawyers in Milan, the city where I live in, that were trained together. And we were, I think, all lawyers that had been experiencing that, fatigue, the litigation fatigue, and were looking for a different way to do things. And but we soon discovered the value of bringing other professionals on the team. So I think one of the efforts we had in Italy was to really train lawyers and convince them that this was a process that, even if it came from the other side of the ocean, was something that we could usefully use in Italy as well. Because once you learn about this process, you really understand that it is, as you were saying at the beginning, it can be structured differently from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but the common sort of keys, the common principles, the core, yes, are the same. And that is because I essentially think that family disputes are very much alike wherever you are. Yes. There can be a lot of cultural nuances and differences and things that we have to deeply consider. But the fact that when a family splits up, there are emotional aspects that you need to consider, financial aspects that need that expertise, legal aspects that need, and at the same time, the need to listen and communicate in a way that probably couples have lost, otherwise they won't be going through a divorce. So I think that these common aspects make this process a process that can be of value in many jurisdictions, but it was an issue in Italy to make this understand to other professionals. But it was a grow that was not, an escalation. It was a sort of a growth that was sort of constant, but not very quick at the beginning. But I think we've done a good job. There are a lot of collaborative professionals now trained, a lot of clients that know about it. And I think we helped, together with the growth of mediation, to educate families that, as we were saying before, divorce does not have to be a war or a battle. It can be a way, just a place where you can find together a solution for sort of parents that want to go co-parenting, and they have to. In many jurisdictions, this is a requirement. So it's a way to learn how to do it, even if you think you've lost that with a divorce.
And it's interesting because, with people who are separating, the emotions really do take over. And often people will think, well, I need to get a lawyer, I need a professional involved. And what we want to make sure of is that you know that there are various different kinds of professionals and various different kinds of negotiation processes that that you can enter into. And so just because you hire a lawyer doesn't mean it has to be this one particular type of lawyer. It has to be a court-oriented lawyer. And I once had a question from a client who had said, you know, if you don't go to court, or you know, are you disbarred? You know, are you allowed to practice as a lawyer? And I said, well, I'm not disbarred. I just choose to help families to stay out of that environment. So anyways, for that clarification, I thought that was an interesting one.
Yeah, lawyers should be seen as problem solvers. And I think we should really advocate for this role. And problems don't always need a court to be solved, you know, so that's part of the consultation that we should give clients, help them understand when a court is necessary and when a court is an option, and what are the other options in front of the client, and what is the best option for that client, that family, that situation. I think that is what our role should be, wherever we are and wherever we come from.
No, that's great. So by way of wrapping up, I'd love to hear from you. I do this at the end of every one of my interviews as my top 3 tips. So from you, Francesca, I'd love to hear your top 3 tips for families who are considering collaborative divorce.
Well, the first tip would be find out if there is a collaborative professional in your area, and so look at a local website, and before even getting into, you know, what the issues of the divorce are, go to speak with a collaboratively trained professional. It doesn't have to be a lawyer. It can be a coach or family professional if you feel more comfortable with it. And if you have any doubt, there is this international website, which is collaborativepractice.com, that lists all professionals, even those in your area. So that is a good place to go and look at. So that would be my first tip. The second tip is usually when you go through these sort of emotional, difficult moments, what is easily lost is communication. And instead, this is something to work on. And what my tip would be is find a moment, a dedicated moment when you can have a difficult conversation with your spouse. Set a time, set a place where you can speak and you're not disturbed, maybe when the children are not hearing. And don't have these conversations when it's a difficult moment for you, when you don't have enough time or in the middle of the night, because that will make it even worse. So this is a tip for all couples that are considering divorce, not just a collaborative divorce, in my experience. And the third is don't think that if you're having a difficult time with your spouse, you can't collaborate, because the value of the collaborative process is that you can have professionals that are there to support you, make those decisions, have those conversations, even if the situation is difficult, even if the communication is hard, even if the trust is not at the maximum level anymore. So don't let those feelings that are very common when you are going through this transition sort of let you not see that there is another way to do it. That would be my tip.
Yeah, and that with carrying on with that third one is, you know, with the right professional support, that trust can start to be rebuilt. And, you know, you can leave even better off after your separation and divorce as far as your relationship with your co-parent or with your former spouse. And if we can bring
that. Yeah. No, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
I was just saying something that I think we've all seen as collaborative professionals, that sometimes the couple learn to communicate in a more productive way than when they arrived. And that's interesting, because maybe that communication piece was lost, or maybe it was not even there from the very beginning. But you can really learn to communicate in a productive way. And And that is very important also, because parents remain parents for the rest of their lives. And I usually tell my clients, you will be, grandparents of the same grandchildren. So you have to find a way.
It doesn't end.
Yeah, it doesn't end. Even if sometimes that's what you really want, to get rid of that person. But it's not that easy.
Yeah, exactly. Just to wrap up here, one of the things I want to remind our viewers, if you found that this kind of information is useful, we also have all sorts of other interviews. We have our book club that you can check out some of the books that we talk about in those interviews. We also have a book library that has all sorts of different really positive and constructive books with links to purchase those books through the independent retailer, of course, but have a look through the rest of our website. We also have our Healthy Thriving Families course that's available to help you with some of those foundational concepts. And I always tell people, the earlier that you take in this information, the better, and the more tools that you can have to build that positive and healthy future for yourself in two homes. So have a checkout of our other resources. And I want to thank you so much, Francesca, for agreeing to come and do this interview with us and let our viewers know a little bit more about the collaborative process. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure, and I can't agree more on what you were just saying. So the faster you start having these resources and getting this information, and the better.
Yeah, the more informed choices that you can make.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Yes.